Mr. Bacharach and Ms. Kusi to our committee. We look forward to having you participate this morning. Welcome to meeting number 30 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The committee is meeting in public today and is being televised. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G, the committee is meeting today to study Report 5, Follow-up Audit on Rail Safety, Transport Canada of the 2021 reports 1 to 5 of the Auditor General of Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members may be attending in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application. It is my understanding that everybody is attending remotely today. So just a few reminders. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. Should any technical challenges arise, please do advise the chair. And also note that we may need to suspend for a few minutes as we want to ensure all members are able to participate fully. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General are Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada, Don Campbell, Principal, and Isabelle Marsolet, Director. And from the Department of Transport, we have Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister, Erin McCrory, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security, and Michael DeJong, Director General, Rail Safety. With that, I would like to now turn the floor over to Ms. Hogan for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the results of our recent follow-up audit of Transport Canada's oversight of rail safety. Joining me today are Don Campbell, the principal responsible for the audit, and Isabelle Marsolet, who was part of the audit team. In this audit, we examined whether Transport Canada implemented selected recommendations from our 2013 audit on the oversight of rail safety. Overall, we found that 8 years later, the department had yet to fully address our recommendations, and that, in fact, there was still much to do to improve the oversight of rail safety in Canada. Rail accidents can have serious consequences, including devastating loss of life and environmental damage. To mitigate safety threats, Transport Canada undertakes oversight activities that include inspections, audits of safety management systems, and data analysis. We want to focus today on two fundamental gaps in the department's oversight activities that require immediate attention. Our first concern is that Transport Canada was not assessing the effectiveness of railway companies' safety management systems. These systems are formal frameworks to proactively integrate safety into day-to-day railway operations. In-depth systematic assessments of these systems are called audits. They are meant to verify whether the systems meet regulatory requirements and integrate safety into daily railway operations. Over the past 14 years, several reports have recommended that Transport Canada undertake such assessments. I am referring here to 3 reports from the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, a number of other reports from experts in the field, and my office's 2013 audit. We found that although the scope of Transport Canada's audits of safety management systems had included assessing regulatory compliance, the department had not considered whether the systems were effective in improving safety in daily operations. Unless the department makes these assessments and follows up in a timely way, it cannot know whether these systems are having an impact on rail safety. Notre seconde inquiétude.
Our second concern is that Transport Canada was unable to show whether its oversight activities have improved rail safety overall. The department has made important improvements to the way it plans and prioritizes its activities and follows up on railway companies' plans and actions to address deficiencies. However, it did not measure the overall effectiveness of its rail safety oversight activities. When people and time are dedicated to overseeing rail safety, I believe it is reasonable to expect that the department measure if the time and the effort invested are making a difference and to adjust its oversight approach as needed. I encourage Transport Canada to consider what other programs and jurisdictions are doing on this front, both in Canada and in other countries. The Canada Energy Regulator, for example, has established indicators that measure components of effectiveness. In the United Kingdom, the Office of Rail and Road has developed tools to assess railway companies' ability to manage health and safety risks. The resulting information is used to make year-over-year progress comparisons. Furthermore, in the United States, the Office of Transit Safety and Oversight has committed to monitoring the effectiveness of state safety agencies. We made 6 recommendations to Transport Canada, and the department has agreed with all of them. I can't underscore enough the importance of taking action on these long-standing issues. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be very happy to answer the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. We will now go to Mr. Keenan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation to appear before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. It's good to see you again, Madam Chair, and it's good to see some familiar faces from the Standing Committee on Transport here today. Aaron, Michael, and myself are looking forward to the questions and the discussion. Transport Canada est responsable de...
Transport Canada is responsible for promoting safe, secure, efficient, and environmentally responsible transportation. Among these activities, safety is our top priority. In this context, I would like to thank the Auditor General for the incredibly important work done on rail safety. From the original audit in 2013 to the follow-up audit in 2021. Both audits challenged us and guided us to do better in our commitment to being a world-class regulator and to improve the very safety of Canada's railway network. The Auditor General's initial audit in 2013 was carried out in the context of a terrible tragedy. The June 2013 train derailment at Lac Mégantic devastated a community, and it cost 47 lives. It exposed major gaps in railway safety, and it led to a fundamental transformation of our oversight regime.
Transformation. Transport Canada introduced a whole suite of stronger rules and regulations. A couple of examples would be the requirement for emergency response assistance plans when railways carry dangerous goods, new requirements for thicker steel and better crash protection on tank cars carrying flammable liquids, a new requirement for administered monetary penalties to help immediately discipline small contraventions of safety practices before they lead to larger problems. The key trains and key routes rule, which set out strict requirements for the transportation of dangerous goods by rail. In addition to these rules and many others, the department dramatically increased surveillance. We went from 107 rail safety inspectors across Canada in 2013 to 155 today. And equipped with more results from more inspections, Transport Canada has systemically developed a risk-based approach to our oversight role. As noted in the Auditor General's follow-up audit, our inspections or oversight activities, which used to be done essentially randomly, are now specifically targeting areas of greater risk based on the information we're collecting on and the data we're collecting on risk. And that this new risk-based approach to oversight is driving a better approach to identifying problems and taking action, including SMS audits, inspections, and also new regulations and rules to identify problems. One example would be last November, we approved the new duty rest rules for railway operating employees, which gets at some of the human factors behind accidents and aligns the rules to modern fatigue science. We've, in the last year, based on audits and analysis from inspections, we've put in new rules for trains carrying dangerous goods to reduce the risk of derailments. As you look across all of these, we have a pattern of stronger rules, more oversight, better risk-based oversight systems. And that's leading to better safety outcomes. However, we have a lot more to do. And the Auditor General has been very helpful in the challenges and the guidance in taking further steps. For example, in this follow-up audit, the Auditor General found that we need to measure the effectiveness of our oversight activities, including the effectiveness of our safety management systems. So we built stronger systems, we've been targeting risk, and now we're drilling down to track effectiveness of individual measures. Transport Canada is working on this recommendation and the other recommendations in the audit and has putting in place a plan of action to address this. And we will be, in the course of this year, beginning to establish the indicators of effectiveness and building and tracking that based on the emerging practices that we're beginning to see in other jurisdictions, which were well noted by the Auditor General. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'll stop here because I don't want to take up too much time and allow us to get on to questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keenan. We will now go to our rounds of questioning for members, and we will start with a 6-minute round, starting with Ms. Kusi for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the team. It's always a pleasure to be with friends. And it's another committee in the place of transport, but I see many members from the Transport Committee, so thank you for your participation.
General, I will start with you, please. Of course, we had the pleasure of having a bit of a conversation during the Transport Committee, and I wanted to sort of highlight two things today. The first, which was the main theme of our conversation last time, which was safety. And at the Transport Committee, Madam Auditor General, I asked you, from your findings, are you concerned for the safety of Canadians based upon the actions that have not been taken by Transport Canada? And from the transcripts in front of me, Madam Auditor General, I can see that you responded, every mode of transportation has its inherent issues. So I guess overall, I would highlight, yes, I am concerned until we can demonstrate that the activities that Transport Canada is doing in coordination with railway companies and other important parties are actually having a difference, we should be concerned. So I wanted to start off by highlighting that your concern for the safety of Canadians remains based upon the testimony you gave at Transport Committee. But upon further discussion and testimony at Transport Committee, it came out that you were happy to see progress within the department. And I heard you talk about progress prior to the committee, which is always a good thing. Of course, in business school, we learn about this concept Kaizen, the Japanese concept, where there is constant improvement. And we hope for this as well. But the truth of the matter is this: is the government that has the authority to instill upon industry the requirements to produce the data, to take the steps in an effort to ensure that Canadians are safe. So now I will move on to that area of responsibility and accountability, which transport must hold industry to. So in your report, you mentioned that Transport Canada collected more information from railway companies, but it was often late, incomplete, and varying in quality, Madam Auditor General. In your audit, you also mentioned that Transport Canada doesn't set timeframes for companies to correct safety deficiencies. So if that is the case, how does Transport Canada ensure that railways are compliant and eventually correct these safety deficiencies, please?
Thank you for a very comprehensive question. I'll try and summarize it all well. So we did see progress since our last audit, as you correctly noted. There was an increase in inspections. There was better follow-up on corrective measures. There was also a risk-based approach to determining the audits of safety management systems. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the department just needs to continue going further. So increasing all of that activity is great. However, you need to now decide whether or not those activities were inspecting the right things, whether they are the right things, and whether or not all of the increase is actually having an impact on improving rail safety. So I do believe, and I stand by my statements, that we should be concerned about the safety of Canadians until we know that the safety management systems, which are creating that culture of safety, are being effective, and if the oversight activities of Transport Canada are also contributing to that effective increase in safety.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor General. So I'm hearing you say that there are still some safety deficiencies which are outlying. Can you address what those might be, please?
Well, I think that's probably a better question asked to the department about where they're seeing deficiencies. But one of the items that you mentioned earlier was setting standards on follow-up. So while they are doing follow-up and making sure corrective actions are taken, they're not really setting a timeline. So it is left on the inspector to go back at some point in time, and that more regular, focused review or follow-up would keep the pressure on railway companies to increase and enhance safety. So most of the activities about oversight are making sure that railway companies are complying with the requirements. But compliance isn't enough. You have to make sure that there's actually an improvement in safety. And so it's hard to pinpoint, because I think every area might have a different deficiency depending on things identified in inspections and so on. So it's hard for me to give you a list, but it's about making a more timely follow-up on deficiencies that have been identified.
Following on that, so in the audit, you did find that Transport Canada did not assess the effectiveness of the railway safety management system, only compliance. And again, this goes back to my second theme, which is the authority of government to ensure that industry is complying and for the better. So then, in your opinion, how would that impact measuring rail safety deficiencies?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. What kind of measures could they look at to measure increase in safety? So I think there are some measures that the department has put in place. They're actually not reporting against certain measures, so actually doing that reporting. But there could also be correlations between the results of compliance trends that they would see in their inspections against fatality or accident trends, and seeing if there's a correlation between those two. So there are many ways that effectiveness of oversight could be measured. It's a matter of defining those that Transport Canada needs to figure out, and then measuring them consistently year over year to be able to see trends.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kusi and Ms. Hogan. We will now go to Mr. Blois for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for your testimony and your work here today. I'm going to start with Mr. Keenan, and on the Auditor General's report 5.22, there's a point made around guidance to railway companies in terms of the information that you're seeking to get. And I think one of the positives from the report and the work that the AG has done is that the department has done a better job of working with railway companies to get relevant information. But it does appear that there needs to be some work in terms of actually giving some guidance about what that information pertains. How did Transport Canada go about finding that information? Was it just simply some type of correspondence saying we're looking for the following points, or how did you go about to collect that information?
Thank you for the question. And Madam Chair, the member puts out a really key question that's at the heart of, I don't want to go, the continuous improvement, the Japanese management system that the previous member described. Because we started out back in 2015 establishing a regulation requiring information, and that the Auditor General has properly noted that there are some inconsistencies in the quality and the format of that information and the timeliness, and we need to tighten up on that, and we're doing that as a follow-up to the Auditor General's recommendations. In terms of the specifics of what we're requiring, I'm going to turn that over to Mr. de Jong to sort of get into in a second. But before that, I do want to make an observation that in essence, what we're doing, in the last few years, we've gone through several rounds of digging deeper and getting better information and data, and using that to target our inspections, using that to target our SMS requirements and audits. And then
Keenan, my apologies. My apologies, Mr. Keenan. I only have 6 minutes, and I have lots I'd love to ask. I
apologize. So, I'm going on too long.
No. Look, detail is great, but we only have so much time on this committee. So what I'm hearing then is there was, of course, an enhanced request for information. I see in the report that the department has committed to standardizing the requests for different companies and trying to have that in a more standardized way. So I appreciate that. I want to go to 5.23, and you were starting to segue to this, which is you're collecting the data, but the Auditor General's report seems to suggest that the data that was being collected is not correlating into how the department is actually choosing to go about its inspection areas on various different railway areas. So how is it that the department makes its determination in where it does its inspections? I heard you mention in your comments something about, high travel areas in terms of the amount of traffic on the rails, or perhaps riskier areas, perhaps where there's hazardous material. How does Transport Canada actually go about making that assessment of where they inspect?
Well, I'd say two things, and I'll be quick. I think the Auditor General has been balanced in her assessment, because has made the point that we've made progress and improved our risk-based planning for oversight in particular, which is in paragraph 520, while pointing out the areas where we have gaps and need to make improvements. We collect through the inspection activities. Through the SMS, we collect a lot of information, and then there is a data-driven sort of risk assessment process that is that then guides two things: one, where we target further oversight, or where we target regulations. I'll give you an example. We've seen in our SMS audits, we've seen some issues around employee training, and we've actually, as we've investigated some incidents, we've discovered the problems resulting from inconsistent employee training. So we've had multiple points of evidence from our inspections, our audits, and even our incidents that says there's an issue with employee training, and we've taken that to actually do two things. in the follow-up to this report, look at indicators on employee training in our SMS audits, but also we're in the process of revising and updating our regulations and standards on employee training, because we think we've identified an area where we can
Mr. Keenan, I apologize. I got to keep moving on.
Okay.
So I'd ask you to be more brisk if you could.
I will. I apologize again.
Quickly, because I have about a minute and a half, but I want to go to the Auditor General quickly. Is it fair to say that the department's looking at standardization in terms of the time for corrective action, but that not all railway companies are created equal? So we should probably create a standard, but have some flexibility, because each situation is going to be different. Is it easy to create just one standard, or should we try to create an average standard and then have some flexibility given the circumstances?
I don't believe that safety is a one-size-fits-all, and especially when it comes to railways, you need to consider the terrain, the rail traffic. There's so many factors, whether it's in a residential area or not. So you do need to have certain standards, but I think you've described it well. Flexibility or recognition of the differences of different risks and different considerations in different areas. But at least having a minimum standard so that follow-up is done on a systematic and regular basis is better than having no standard.
I have about 15 seconds, so I'm going to table this question for you. You mentioned in 5.21 and 5.48 the idea about trying to measure whether or not the effectiveness of Transport Canada's regulations are leading to better safety. You mentioned it's complex. If you get the chance in future questions, I'd like to dig deeper, because you do mention it's difficult, but don't we need some time over time to understand whether or not this is actually meeting the outcomes? So I know I'm running out of time, and I wish I had more than 6 minutes, so thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blois. We will now go to Mr. Blanchard-Joncan for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I want to certainly say hello to everyone here. First of all, my question is for Madame Hogan. I understand very well your report, the present role of the railway companies in Canada, and there are some 68 of them. There has to be the safety aspect that is assured through standards. What I understand, though, from your report is that these individual train companies are not able to provide on their own the security that is requisite. So Transport Canada says it has to have more oversight, but there is not an improvement in the actual train safety, rail safety. If I'm correct, Ms. Hogan, over years there have been changes in the regulations since 2001. Since 2001, rail companies have become responsible for putting in place their own oversight systems on the ground with their own inspectors. So I want to hear it from you. Can you tell me if this is a type of uniformization, and does this correlate with what the government had in mind when it brought about these changes? We have a disastrous situation now. You're right that rail companies are responsible for their own security, and I would like to suggest that it's really a partnership. Safety is a partnership. But Transport Canada plays an extremely important role in terms of oversight and follow-up, a heightened follow-up with the rail companies. And I think this is a good mix to improve security and safety. I was asked if there would be a correlation between the changes and the regulations. We looked at the activities of Transport Canada, and when we look at the time, effort, and energy that's been put into the work that they do, we have to assess whether or not that investment is being fruitful. We'd have to look at the good risks. Is it really the good risk, the right risk, and is it efficient? Thank you, Ms. Hogan. I just want to understand at what point in time did it change? The change in regulations, it would seem to me, was it. And at that point, we saw that there was a drop in actual inspection and audit. And that led to certain consequences that we can see today. What I note in your report also is that Transport Canada did not give detailed enough guidelines to the rail companies. So that was incomplete information that came back to Transport Canada. The decisions should have been more enlightened than they were. If the rail companies that are responsible for maintaining the infrastructure aren't able to do so, Transport Canada has certainly made some improvements, though. But there should be an action plan. There should be a report over a time span of several years. What do you see then as what should be done to change the situation? You've mentioned a variety of points. The data that Transport Canada collects from the rail companies is my departure point. Yes, it would be good to accumulate more information, and that has been undertaken. But the data has to be collected in a timely fashion. And Transport Canada has to be informing the companies where they should be inspecting, in what time frame the inspections should be carried out. This is a point I'm bringing up. It's the quality of data I'm talking about here. You want to have good data, but then you want to be able to use the data afterwards in order to improve the inspection approach, to have it based on healthy risk, good risk. And if the results of the SMS systems are in place, that's what should be done. It's really a matter of properly using the data and the systems that you have to be able to improve the efficiency of the oversight. I quite agree with you, Madame. But it seems to me that the report indicated that there was a rather scattershot approach that was undertaken, but the results weren't proven to be good. And there was, unfortunately, human tragedy, the 47 deaths at Lac Mégantic. And Mr. Berthold, my colleague, has to live on a daily basis with people who suffered from that. Sure, you lay down oversight, but if it's not respected, if the rules aren't respected, things continue to happen. Well, let me say that rail safety is important for everyone, not just for me, but the Commissioner for Sustainable Development. You know that last fall there was an intervention about the transportation of hazardous materials. I appeared at the Committee at Transport and also Public Accounts to do a follow-up on June 2014. There was a recommendation that was issued to Transport. So if everybody acts together, that's how we improve security and safety.
Thank you very much. We will move on to Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a chance to ask some questions of Ms. Hogan at a previous meeting of the Transport Committee, so I'll be directing my questions today to Mr. Keenan. My first question is just around the pattern that we're seeing. At a recent committee meeting, we were looking at an audit of pandemic preparedness. And what we saw was that an audit was done several years ago, pointed out a bunch of shortcomings, made a bunch of recommendations. The agency, PHAC, agreed with all the recommendations and committed to implementing them. Years went by, there was a follow-up audit, the recommendations weren't implemented. Here we see a major disaster affecting a community in such a profound way. 47 people died. We see an audit that made a number of recommendations, I think the whole country was looking to the federal government to do everything in its power to correct the deficiencies that allowed that disaster to occur. Years go by, 8 years, we have a follow-up audit, and the recommendations weren't implemented. Mr. Keenan, I'm wondering if the Canadian public should be satisfied with that response and in general with this pattern of not implementing the recommendations that are made by the Office of the Auditor General.
Thank you for the question. I think in this case, there's a very clear pattern of significant and major improvements in the rail safety system and the oversight. And those significant improvements have been actually noted by the Auditor General in the follow-up audit. The Auditor General also pointed out where there's more work to do, and we agree with that. So as a world-class regulator, we're always committed to keep driving towards zero on this. So in terms of the improvements and the actions taken in response to the 2013 audit, I would point out to the fact that there has been a dramatic increase in the number of inspections, and we have, in terms of the recommendation to better oversight, to better focus oversight on higher risk, we actually went from a random inspection system to a risk-based one based on data and analysis of risks. In terms of strengthening the safety management system, we completely overhauled the regulations for safety management systems. And we went from doing 4 audits of SMS programs per year to 25. So in a systemic way, from the oversight to the safety standards, there has been a significant improvement in the rail safety system. And outside observers, for example, have noted this significant improvement. For example, the Independent Rail Safety Act Review Committee, which reported in 2018, said the safety of the rail system has improved in the last 5 to 10 years due to a sustained focus on inspections, compliance, and enforcement, as well as technological improvements and investments in rail infrastructure.
Mr. Keenan, just on account of time, I'm going to have to move on to my next question.
Sure.
I think that the point, I acknowledge that progress has been made, and the Auditor General pointed that out in her audit. The question was about the fact that there were things that the Auditor General pointed out that weren't done. And I think the Canadian public would expect that all the recommendations were implemented, especially over an 8-year period. But I'd like to move on to the safety management systems themselves. This was a large part of the audit. And I've been speaking with the rail companies. This is an issue that is of serious concern for not only the community I live in, but the communities up and down the railroad in Northwest BC. And what I've discovered, and maybe I'll start with the question around response plans, because I think when we think of safety management systems, we mostly think about preventative measures, behaviors and actions that prevent bad things from happening. But my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but safety management systems also include response plans in the case that things do go wrong. And of particular interest, given the increase in dangerous goods being transported through our region, is the risk of something similar to Lac-Mégantic happening in one of our rail yards, where we have multiple cars of extremely volatile products like liquid propane parked on the tracks. Now, in speaking with the rail companies, they told me that they, first of all, rely on first responders, mostly volunteer firefighters in small communities, to respond to these events. They provide training, but they only work on scenarios involving single car events. In your view, given Lac-Mégantic, given these multi-car events that have tragic consequences, should these safety management systems have response plans for events involving multiple cars? In your experience, and based on your knowledge, is that a risk that communities should be concerned about when it comes to products like liquid propane? And is the current approach the rail companies are taking adequate?
Thank you for the question. A lot of questions there. I'll do 2 really fast, and then I'll turn the third one over to my colleague, Mr. de Jong. On the first one, Transport Canada took significant action on all of the recommendations in the 2013 report. Happy to elaborate later. On the second one, the rail safety system is vastly improved today relative to what we had before the Lac-Mégantic tragedy. So the risk profile is completely different and much lower today. On your third question with respect to scenarios and response plans as they fit into SMS, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
And that will have to be a very short answer.
Okay, thank you for the question. I would simply point out that with respect to our oversight regime in that northern BC corridor, we're taking a number of active measures to address the risks that have been identified, including front-ending a number of our inspections in that area, as well as noting to the company that their corridor falls under the definition of key trains and key routes, which involves reduced speed limits, as well as requirements for increased track inspections.
Thank you very much. We will now go to our next round of questioning. It's a 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Berthold for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Madame.
Thank you very much, Chair, Ms. Hogan, and all the other witnesses. I'm very happy to be here with you today, but I think I should perhaps make a clarification here. Mr. Keenan, I heard last week that the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister talk about the 2013 audit. You quoted the 2013 audit in your opening remarks. You said that the audit led by the AG in 2013 was in the context of a tragedy. I think you're wrong, and I think the Parliamentary Secretary was wrong when you say that, because the 2013 audit, and I quote, our report is not an inquiry, an investigation on the tragic events that occurred in Lac-Mégantic or any other type of accident, because it was finished in June 28th, 2013, before the tragedy occurred in July. So I find it inconceivable that you use the tragedy in your presentation like that. All the recommendations that were made and that were brought forward by the AG dealt with things in that report that occurred before 2013's tragedy. So why are you linking the 2013 tragedy with the audit itself? Because it was specifically mentioned that in that audit that our report does not deal specifically with the tragedy.
Thank you for the question, and I apologize if I actually created a false impression on the relationship between the Auditor General report and the terrible tragedy of Lac-Mégantic. The fundamental reality is that it was a terrible tragedy, and there is a relationship between and it showed dramatically weaknesses in the rail safety system, and there has been a tremendous amount of work over the years to strengthen the rail safety system in an effort to ensure that such a terrible tragedy doesn't happen again. And so there is a causal relationship. I may not have described the timing exactly right in my opening remarks, and for that I apologize. But it is our assessment that there were serious problems in the rail safety system that we've been working years to improve upon, and searching for risk factors and using a data-driven system to find risk factors to preclude the possibility of such a tragedy is a top priority for Transport Canada.
Merci, Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, but I think it's important to be very precise about this. In the briefing notes that Transport Canada gives to the Parliamentary Secretary with respect to the study of 2013, which linked it to the tragedy of the same year, it's very important to say that the 2013 recommendations were a follow-up to the tragedy. Well, that was not the case at all. I'm pointing it out here because it's important. Before the tragedy was one thing, but after the tragedy was another. And the recommendations that were made post-tragedy should have been implemented. Since the spring of 2014, Transport Canada has set out follow-up guidelines to improve the standardization of or uniformity of the follow-up that is done by the rail companies. That should mean, in Madame Hogan's, it was one of your latest audits, that was a point, that there was a lack of standardization and uniformity in the follow-up to the report. Is that question for me or who? Yes, you're right. You repeated what we said in our report with respect to uniformity, but with respect to uniformity, you have to adjust for risk. We want uniformity to ensure that inspection and oversight is done in a uniform way so that nothing is forgotten. So, Mr. Keenan, as I mentioned, there was a before and an after to that event. Transport Canada should give priority to this type of recommendation. And why now then, in 2020, are we hearing the Auditor General say the same thing and make the same recommendation?
I think we're seeing
a very short answer, Mr. Keenan.
I think you're seeing the follow-up audit recognize the progress that Transport Canada made and has asked us to take further steps in building a risk-based oversight program where we're doing a better job aligning our resources and our actions to safety outcomes, and we are executing those follow-up recommendations as we speak.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Ms. Yip for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hogan, and for your team for doing a follow-up report. Follow-ups are so important to ensure that we do not have further or future tragedies occur, hopefully. My first question is to Mr. Keenan. It was touched upon, but I'd just like to hear a bit of a clear answer. Why was there too large of a focus on regulatory compliance rather than the effectiveness of the safety management system?
I think the question really relates to a strategy of systemically strengthening the regulatory and the oversight system. So the first step we took was to overhaul the rules for SMS in 2015. And then the second step was to ensure and putting in place more standards for what had to be in a safety management system that is more likely to relate to better outcomes. The second step was ensuring compliance to these higher standards by auditing all of them. And the third step is using the data from the SMS audits and the data from other sources to begin to get a better sense of which particular elements relates and has what effect on safety outcomes. So we've done the first two, and we're now working on the third. And the follow-up report from the Auditor General has given us some good guidance. And in the process of that report, have had some very robust discussions between transport officials and AG officials in terms of how to take that next step, recognizing it's a very difficult one to do, and even around the world, it's sort of, I would classify it as an emerging practice.
Thank you. Ms. Hogan, are you satisfied by the response given by the department to your report, or do you feel that we will be seeing more reports, hopefully not another 8 years or sooner?
As I've mentioned in my opening remarks, I am very concerned about the length of time that's elapsed since our first audit, but I do acknowledge that some action was taken. It's just now transport needs to go that step further. Measuring effectiveness is, as I also mentioned in my opening remarks, is something that is being done, but the Deputy Minister of Transport is correct. It's an emerging thing. It is a commitment, however, that was made by Transport Canada over many years. And so I think I am always concerned when we have these longstanding issues, and it seems to be a lot of what we're finding lately that aren't addressed, that long-term thinking is not always valued as much as it needs to be. But the action plan that has been put forward appears reasonable within its time frame, and I know that both myself and the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development will be watching what Transport Canada does, because we have 2 audits now in the span of a year that cover safety and transport, and we're going to want to make sure that action's taken.
That's good to hear. Mr. Keenan, in the OAG recommendations, it is mentioned that Transport Canada should improve data management for its safety management system audits by adhering to its documentation standards. And there was in your action plan, there was a review of sample audit files from across headquarters and the regions for compliance with documentation standards that was completed in April 2021. What was the result of these sample files, or the audit of these sample files?
Thank you for the question. I would say, I'm going to give a very quick general response and then turn it to Michael, is that the kind of issues the AG found with respect to the data and the documentation are core issues we need to resolve and are working as quickly as we can to resolve in order to make sure that we can fully leverage the data and put digital analysis tools on it. If it's not properly formatted, if it's not consistent, then our attempts to bring in advanced analytics to identify safety risks is frustrated. So we're highly motivated to fix these issues. In terms of the steps we're taking, I'll turn it to Michael to elaborate.
Thank you for the question.
Again, I'm sorry, a very brief answer.
Thanks for the question. Essentially, the sample showed that we are collecting a wealth of information from railway companies, including operating characteristics, traffic patterns, tonnage, previous incidents. But as the Deputy Minister mentioned, in order for us to use all of this data in order to drive our risk-based approach, it needs to be formatted in a way that allows Transport Canada to collate it and analyze it quickly, so that it can help support our risk-based planning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move on to our next round of questioning. It's a 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My questions are for Transport Canada. I look at recommendation 5.45, which deals with the planning process for oversight. You don't take necessarily into consideration the data gathered around the SMS systems of the rail companies. So if there's a problem in a rail company's SMS, what do you do? Do you verify? Do you check to see if the necessary measures to correct were undertaken? Do you issue a reprimand to the rail company?
Thank you for a very insightful question. And I think the Auditor General's assessment of our challenge here is fair, is we were not systemically pulling information from our SMS audits to shape our risk-based oversight. We were doing it in some cases, but not all. And most importantly, we didn't have a documented system that the AG could find to show we were doing it. And so we are building that in to, and we believe that will be a significant improvement in having a more robust risk-based oversight system. We're actually taking the steps now to build that in. And I would add, if I could, to go back to the Auditor General's remark about the time. And sometimes I think in the past we may have taken a bit longer than we should have to execute some of our recommendations. We are really trying to time bound our follow-up actions, and there's a series of things, of material improvements that we'll have done by the end of 2021 to respond to the recommendations coming from this audit, and this is one of them.
Thank you. In 2001, there were amendments that were made to the Rail Safety Act that meant that the rail companies had to take on the responsibility of providing their own SMS systems to provide for public safety. Are you now satisfied with the Rail Safety Act as it stands now? Because there are some things that seem to slip by.
I'll answer that in two parts, if I can. I think that the law creating this responsibility for stronger responsibility for safety management systems is essential to having better safety outcomes because it creates the imputability.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we are well over time for this questioner. Perhaps you can address that in your next round of questioning, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. We will now move on to Mr. Bachrach for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pick up where I left off with Mr. de Jong. We were talking about specific types of events involving multiple rail cars, and I was somewhat surprised to hear from CN that they rely so heavily on local first responders, and that in providing training for local first responders, these are volunteer fire departments, they only train them for incidents involving single cars of liquid propane. In the view of Transport Canada, is that adequate preparedness for an event? And should they be preparing local first responders for events involving multiple rail cars?
Thank you for the question. I'll answer it in a couple of parts. One is with respect to the support that Transport Canada provides, and then second is the requirements under the key train key routes that CN must fulfill in this corridor because it is identified as a key route. Transport Canada supports first responders, for example, with around-the-clock support through our operations center, referred to as CANUTEC. There's also a series of guidelines and training that we provide to first responders. With respect to the key trains, key routes rule, under that rule, for routes that are designated key routes, such as the one in this context, CN is responsible for conducting a risk assessment that accounts for the training of local fire departments as part of their risk assessments, as well as implementing remedial measures to address potential risks identified through that process.
But right now, they're only training first responders for single rail car events. Is that adequate?
So again, I would fall back on the requirements of the key trains and key risk rule. So in order to determine whether it's adequate, CN is responsible for conducting a risk assessment to determine whether or not their current training measures are appropriate to the level of risk on that corridor, and then adapting their training regime to match the level of risk.
So to get this straight, the rail company determines the level of risk and what the training and response requirements are in case they have a major incident. In this case, they've decided that the risk of a multi-car incident is low, and so they only train first responders on events involving single rail cars. My question is, given what we saw in Lac-Mégantic, I'm not an expert, but I think if you have a car of liquid propane explode, and it's connected to a train of other cars of liquid propane, the chance of a multi-car event isn't zero. My question is, at what point does Transport Canada step in and say, you know what you're doing to ensure the safety of communities isn't adequate? We need better.
I'm sorry, we don't have time for an answer to that question, given it's a very short round. I will now move on to Mr. Berthold for 5 minutes.
And I'll be happy to hear the answer from the question from Mr. Bachrach.
Well, I think I'll say one thing on that because it's a really good question, and I think what Michael was saying, Mr. de Jong was saying a minute ago, is that under the new stronger regulations on key trains and key routes, CN is legally obliged to perform a new risk assessment and submit it to Transport Canada. They are performing that risk assessment now, and it is through that risk assessment and our review of that risk assessment that we get to the underlying sort of facts that drive to the answer to your question.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Keenan,
Mr. Keenan, I noticed in the AG's report the number of accidents. Now we're talking about 2019, and I know there have been improvements since that time. When you look at the figures, and you look at the number of collisions, derailments, the level crossing accidents, is there a way of looking at the scope, the breadth, or the importance, significance of these accidents? Do you divide them up into serious accidents or less serious accidents? How do you determine where the real risk lies for rail transportation? How do you account for that? Is it $10,000 and above are accidents that a train that is derailed is going to cost far more than $10,000, even if it's just in a field?
In answer to the very good question, and it's one that we spend a lot of time drilling down on, and it features in the current work we're doing, establishing indicators of effectiveness of SMS systems. I would say a couple of principles that would guide us in that. The first is that we do look at incidents in terms of how grave. The number one indicator is the risk to the health and safety of Canadians, not the economic cost of the accident. That's very much secondary, if not hardly considered. It's the risk to the health and safety of Canadians, the risk to disrupting communities, and the risk to the environment. Those are the factors we consider. I'll give you an example. Uncontrolled movements. We have put in a significant number of stronger regulations on uncontrolled movements. We analyze them carefully. It's a key factor in our risk-based oversight. I would say we are not satisfied. There are still too many uncontrolled movements, and that we are continuing to drive on the SMS and on the regulatory standards. We've made changes within the last year.
Mais est-ce que vous avez accès à...
Yes, but do you have access to enough information? Because what we're hearing is that in other areas, other jurisdictions, they have more accessible data that allows them to assess the risk and to see the results of the measures that they have put in place. Do you agree with that information?
A great question. And in fact, the improvements we're making literally month by month and year by year is pulling in more information to assess risk and identify risk. We give you and we are actually putting in regulatory standards to collect more information. One of them is the stricter standards on the rail information that companies have to supply. A second one is the regulations we put in place last year for locomotive video and voice recorders to create access to a new class of information to understand what was happening in the cab just before an incident, to identify factors, human factors, potentially distraction factors that we could improve safety systems. So we're always looking for more data to answer the members' questions, and we're bringing it in. We're also getting it formatted and structured so we can apply advanced digital analytic tools. I'll stop there. There's a few examples where we're starting to do that in a I would say a basic manner, and we want to go to a more advanced manner, including putting predictive analytics on the data we're collecting.
Est-ce que ce serait possible, Monsieur Keenan, de...
Mr. Keenan, would it be possible to send the committee all the data that is available? I'm not just talking about figures over the course of several years, but the data that you have at hand to evaluate, to assess risk in the various accidents, collisions, and interventions that have occurred, because I'd like to have a picture here of what's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Berthold. I'm sure that Mr. Keenan will send the information that you have requested. We will now move on to Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to continue on with some of my colleagues' questions, Mr. Berthold, talking about data. Before I do that, though, with Mr. Keenan, 2018, we did the Railway Safety Act review. I can remember the discussions in the House. I participated in the debates. One of the things that was being debated was the use of video recorders within the cabs. You mentioned it just briefly in your answer there. There was significant investment allocated towards level crossings, track maintenance. I think 60 locomotives were added to help with grain movement out west. A lot of people were added in terms of numbers of engineers that are operating vehicles on tracks. So a number of investments that actually could have increased the risk profile if we didn't keep up with infrastructure improvements, such as things like video recorders and gauging of tracks. When you're doing your risk analysis, are you using the investments as one of the drivers of risk as well? The numbers of cars on tracks, amount of vehicle movements that are happening?
It's a great question, and we certainly are taking into account all of those factors. I would say, and that we are looking across. I'll give you an example where we are looking across. We saw a pattern of derailments, of main track derailments sneaking up. Very, very concerned. We pulled all the data we could and started doing sort of data analytics on it. I don't want to oversell it. It was basically detailed Excel spreadsheets looking for trends and variances, et cetera. And we found a pattern related to temperature, ambient temperature in the day of the accident, whether or not the track was signaled, i.e. it had a system to automatically identify broken rail, and speed. And so we put in place the higher risk key train rule last year to get at that. So we're always looking at and infrastructure is a big part of it. I would say the data that we're seeing and the analysis we're seeing is taking us to, I would say, a broader dimension, which is getting more into human factors. It's not traditionally been part of the rail safety system. We focused on the machine, on the rolling stock and the track and the procedures, and we're now getting into, for example, we've changed the work rest rules for fatigue. And so I think we're broadening out the number of things we look at. And as data comes in, we're finding factors that we may not have been looking at in the past that we see as being significant in outcomes, which is why LVVR is so important, because we think that there are some subtle human factors that we can understand by analyzing the patterns related to cab activity before incidents.
And fatigue science and duty rest rules absolutely are needed for the safety of the operators, as well as the incredibly dangerous equipment that they're operating when not operating effectively. I also want to touch on some of the data coming out of your reports, the fatalities resulting from railway operations dropping by 27%, the number of accidents decreased by 12%. Do you have a comment you could make on the goals? Are you achieving goals, or are you reporting results against goals? Is reducing fatalities by 27% on target, or were you hoping for better? Where are we at on the actual analysis going forward?
You've cut, the member has, Madam Chair, the member's cut to the fundamental objective, which is to actually get the fundamentally important things like accidents and deaths down. So we see it heading in the right direction. We have accidents down, deaths down, while actually there's more trains and there's more revenue ton miles there. So the rate is down
as volume is increasing.
As volume is increasing. I don't think. And what I'll say, I'd say one thing: we don't have our goal is zero, and we are going to keep doing stuff to get as close as we can.
Thank you. And in Guelph, we have the Guelph Junction Railway. It's one of the federally regulated railways, one of 3 in Canada. And they've just done significant track work on gauging. The neighbors weren't happy with all the construction. We've also closed one of the level crossings in Guelph where the visibility sightlines for vehicle traffic wasn't safe enough. So there actually are investments going forward that might help you with those targets. And we see them in our community. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I would just say, Madam Chair, the members identified a key issue, which is the crossings, the level crossings. And so the safety result depends on, our rules and the railway's operations, but what the landowners are doing and what others are doing around those crossings. And that's a key area of focus going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move into our next round of questioning, which is another 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Keenan, in view of the fact that we talked a lot about the Lac Mégantic tragedy, I'd like to inform the members of the committee what is exactly happening now according to what the minister has confirmed to me, to what has been done for 2023. Are you optimistic about what's being put in place? Well, we are very optimistic about the bypass that's being built, and we're working with CP.
In one way, it took a little bit of time when CP bought CMQR. In another way, we're very pleased because there is a large outfit that has the ability to marshal massive resources in building. We're working through very intensely with CP on details. We believe we're establishing a very clear path forward to get this done. Around the target timeline. In terms of the details of next steps, I think there's a couple of small things where we want to just absolutely finalize with the operator but are working really hard to be able to share more information on the timing of next steps. In terms of completing the voie de contournement, I can tell you that it is a top priority to get that done. On the part of Transport Canada.
Good to hear, Mr. Keenan. There's a part of the work left to do who is under the Government of Canada, les acquisitions de terrain exactement. Tout ça, est-ce que...
For example, land acquisition. Now, with respect to that comes under the Government of Canada. Can you assure us that this is moving along properly? Land acquisition is always sensitive in a project like that, but we have done a great deal of work to prepare the next step, and we believe that it will be ready soon. And the next step will include land acquisition and the ownership of it, involving the regional owners in committees. Well, I was part of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee that met at Lac Mégantic at the time, and we met all the stakeholders. At that time, there was the possibility of putting in place an institute to ensure rail safety. It has been brought up but rejected several times by Transport Canada. And today we deal with the first responders, and you've talked about it, and their training, the training for the first responders. Why was there no approval for what was proposed by given what we lived through at Lac Mégantic, we don't want this to happen again.
Madam Chair, the members asked a good question because we continue to look at areas of action and investment to strengthen training, performance, and safety results. I have to confess, I can't remember all the details of that proposal because it was in circulation, I think, a couple of years ago. And so I don't have at my fingertips a sort of specific information that I can share at this time, but I would be happy to provide.
I will be happy to send you the project like you will send us some statistic.
Sure. I remember I remember the proposal. I just can't remember all the details. So thank you for offering to resend it.
Yeah, that's great, because I think for the formation is a one matters of importance when we are in a tragedy, and waiting till the next tragedy before acting is just bad. So we can do something right now, and I hope that we can do it together, working together, because we all want a better safety rail system in Canada, be at the highest level.
I absolutely agree with you. Mr. Keenan, did the AG invite you to see what's being done in other jurisdictions to improve rail safety in Canada? Have you gotten into contact with the AG to see precisely what she'd like you to see outside of Canada, and will you go? We have representatives of Transport Canada and that have had interesting conversations as to best practices that would from elsewhere that would help us guide us in what we are doing in trying to measure SMS effectiveness.
Right on that, because you're the one who had those conversations.
Berthold, you have 10 seconds left.
Mike? No, maybe not.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. We've actually done follow-up with the US, our US counterparts, as well as with UK and European Union counterparts, to look into potential indicators for how we can look into improving our measurements of the oversight regime, including potentially leveraging some best practices from the US, as well as our Canadian energy regulator in terms of potential performance indicators.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Sorbera for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for everyone's testimony. The issue of rail safety, let me just move this. The issue of rail safety is of paramount importance in the area that I live in, and frankly obviously represent. The city of Vaughan is home to CN's largest rail yard in the country, the Mackenzie Yard, and Canada Pacific, or CP, busiest intermodal facility in the country, is located on the west side of my riding. And I have a rail line going over the main artery of a regional road here along Highway 7, and another a bridge going across a very densely populated area with many seniors across Woodbridge Avenue here in the heart of the riding. And to add to that matter, I'll say, growing up in northern British Columbia and Prince Rupert, having a very busy rail facilities there, and the coal port, the grain elevator. Obviously, my exposure to rail and rail safety is of paramount importance and always on my mind for my residents, of course, first and foremost. I just want to pull up the report, and I want to go to the AG, and I've read very intently sections 5.56 and 5.57, where the Auditor General, you speak to about the 66 inspections that conducted between September 2018 and August 2020 that required a railway to take follow-up action. It seems quite effectively that our railway operators have followed up to those inspections. Can you comment on that, Auditor General, please?
I might ask Don Campbell to add perhaps a little bit more detail if you'd like some more specifics, but I mean, our findings were such that in the 66 inspections that we looked at, that the department had confirmed that the railway company had taken action in 92% of the files that we reviewed. And then there was some plans to address outstanding issues in the 8% of the files that remained, which is about five of those files. So I don't know, Don, if you wanted to provide a little bit more color to the findings there.
I think you summarized. I think that's been summarized quite well. So, yeah, nothing to add at this point.
In the transportation of dangerous goods, if I can ask, I know MP Bachrach, former mayor of Smithers, if I remember correctly, in the area of the country that I spent the first 20 years of my life in. We know the transportation of dangerous goods is obviously something we think about and so forth. But in Auditor General, in your purview, how much progress have we made? I know this is a kind of a big picture question. I believe in the Skeena-Bulkley Valley riding that the number of incidents is actually very, very low. That there has been no release of dangerous goods at all in the last, say, 10, 15 years. But Auditor General, how much progress, and even to the Transportation Safety Board, how much progress have we made in ensuring that the transportation of dangerous goods and the release subsequently, if an incident happens, how confident can we be in the processes in place?
I can't really speak to specifics of a riding, but I can talk to you a little bit about the overall findings in the most recent report that the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development tabled back in October. His findings were quite similar to the ones of the follow-up audit that we're looking at now, was that steps had been taken by Transport Canada, but they just hadn't gone far enough. And I think one of the most important items that remained outstanding from the dangerous goods follow-up was that a standard for flammable liquids had not yet been established. Now, that was at the time of our audit. There was supposed to be a deadline in early 2021, but at the time of our audit, that had not yet been established. So I think we're seeing very similar findings in both follow-up audits. So recognizing progress, but really important steps still outstanding.
Is there any follow-up from Transport Canada on that?
I agree with the Auditor General's take. Significant progress in terms of dangerous goods, some areas outstanding, which we are driving to address. There's two parts to that. One of it, there's some similarity to the observations on this audit in that there is we had to do a better job systemically connecting the risk information we're seeing from our inspections to our follow-ups and on dangerous goods inspections. And on that one, we went from 30 inspectors to 90, and we have to do more to make it more risk-based. In terms of the specific item the Auditor General raised, I'm going to turn over to Mike because I know we're following up on that, but could you just remind us, the committee members, of the timetable on that? Or Aaron? Somebody has to come off mute to answer.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, maybe I can take that, and I apologize. In terms of a specific recommendation around a new fuel standard, I'm not familiar with that recommendation from the CSED audit. As the deputy had noted, there were recommendations around updating our tools and database to have more complete, accurate information, tracking documentation to verify that companies have returned to compliance. Ensuring that the means of containment facilities where certificates have expired aren't doing those activities. So, for example, that is now closed. We've closed that recommendation.
Sorry, it's actually the standards for flammable liquids on ERAPs. That was outstanding for years, and the standard's now been established, and we're now in the process of communicating that and implementing it. I don't think we've communicated it out yet, but we're in the process of doing it this year.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is for Mr. Keenan. Earlier, you talked about imputability for rail companies as to their role in having an SMS system. Well, what did you mean? Are there fines? Can you withdraw their responsibility? What did you mean? Thank you for the question. The imputability is first demonstrated in their drawing up an SMS plan according to the 2015 rules. And secondly, they have to put into effect that SMS system.
SMS regs that were put in place in 2015, there's multiple points of kind of accountability. And if a company fails to deliver on that accountability, there is as conditions warrant and as facts warrant, an ability to sort of go from inspections and oversight to an enforcement process that could result in, for example, administrative monetary penalties.
Mr. Keenan, could you give me a written response with respect to the 2015 accountability rules for rail companies? In 2001, Transport Canada said that there was going to be regulatory oversight of SMS, but that was going to be transferred to the rail companies to have their own SMS systems. But then in 2015, Transport Canada said that there were gaps and they would have to replace certain regulations. So there's a role of oversight of Transport Canada to be included in the SMS systems in the rail companies. But now in the AG's report, we see that it's that if Transport Canada is that it is in fact rather Transport Canada that cannot measure the efficiency of the SMSs that have been put in place by the rail companies. It seems to me that you can't ensure the effectiveness of the results.
There's two parts to kind of that answer to answer that question. The first is that the regs in 2015 established a modern standard for what has to be in a safety management system with significant detail that maps to the best knowledge of the day in terms of safety outcomes. And it's the accountability and responsibility of the operator to build that system and to document it back to Transport Canada. So we first and foremost assess the compliance with the regs and that was the primary focus of the dramatic increase in audits of SMS plans. And that assures a higher level of safety performance overall. A second aspect is an analytical question of actually taking different elements of the SMS plan and SMS performance and analytically establishing a quantitative relationship between that specific thing and a broader safety outcome. And that's the work that we're doing now. So the accountability of the companies is there, the improved safety performance is there, and we're now working to go to the next level of analytically tying specific elements of the safety system to outcomes. And that's a complicated piece of work, and it's an emerging piece of regulatory safety oversight for which we're consulting with the leaders in this practice around the world to ensure that we've got a world-class framework and approach for doing that.
Okay, Mr. Keenan, moi je trouve pas ça.
I don't find it very complicated, Mr. Keenan. In 2015, there was a new regulatory framework, new regulations. But the AG is saying today that your department is able to measure the efficacy of those regulations, of the SMS.
We've established the regs and we've done audits to ensure compliance. We're using the data from that to improve effectiveness. There is a broader question, which is mapping the safety outcome, and the safety management system is built on the principle that the operator has a key role and their management is a key factor in safety outcomes, as well as the regulations and standards of Transport Canada and the oversights of Transport Canada and the work of communities and grade crossings, employees. There are many players and there are many factors in the safety outcome. The work the Auditor General has asked us to do is to start to isolate those factors, and to identify in some analytical, if possible, quantitative manner, how each specific factor of each element of the SMS and the other elements of the safety system contribute to the improving performance of lower accidents with higher volumes. We are in the process of doing that. That does not, the fact that that is ongoing does not undermine the fact that the operators are accountable to a much more exacting standard in terms of their safety management systems and have been since 2015, and they're being rigorously audited on it. And when they're coming up short, they're subject to enforcement measures from Transport Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchette-Jonquin. We will now go on to Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Keenan, picking up on the key trains and key routes aspect, and in particular, the situation in Northwest BC, I understand from your previous comments that CN is doing a risk assessment, but has not yet completed it, and that Transport Canada has established standards for flammable liquids, but has not yet communicated those to the rail company. The challenge I have is that the trains are rolling. If I walk out the door of my office right now and look down the street, I can see them. And they've been rolling for some time. In 2019, the first liquid propane terminal in Prince Rupert began operation, and the second terminal began operation just recently. Should these steps have not been taken before those trains rolled? And are our communities at higher risk until those steps are completed, until the risk assessment is completed by CN and Transport Canada has a chance to check it out? Why are we doing these things retroactively after the trains are already rolling?
Two parts to that. The first is that trains have been rolling to Prince Rupert with flammable liquids for many years, and that there's been a systemic and increase in the standards around these kind of key trains, which are trains carrying dangerous goods. There's been a systemic increase in standards for high-risk key trains, and the kind of trains you're talking about qualify. And that as part of those higher standards, when there is a change in operating, including greater volumes, there's a requirement to update the risk standard. So there's been risk assessments, there have been standards, and there have been measures put in place for years. And now there is a regulatory requirement for CN to provide an updated risk standard, a risk assessment, and for Transport Canada to assess that. But that's not the first step in the safety process. There's been many steps before. I
guess how I look at it is that the reason the increased standards are being put in place is because there's increased risk. And Transport Canada knew there was going to be increased risk because these projects were on the books for some number of years. Why not do the risk assessment? Why not require the rail company to do the risk assessment prior to the volumes increasing on the rails? Why are we, we're kind of doing it, we're doing the assessment process while the trains are rolling. Why not do it beforehand?
Well, I think, but to go back to my previous answer, there have been multiple risk assessments and multiple actions taken to strengthen the safety standard around key trains and key routes, including high-risk key trains like the ones you're describing. So we're not just starting. There's been major changes and major strengthenings of the systems and risk assessments related to that. And as traffic patterns change, there's an ongoing pattern and there's an ongoing requirement for new risk assessments. And it's not a one-off; it's a stream of these. And there is one that CN is due to us, I think, this month. Mike, could you just elaborate on the timing of the next risk assessment?
Yes, sorry, just struggling with the mute button. Thank you for the question. And we actually evaluate these situations every 3 years. So it is on a cyclical basis. The deadline for the risk assessment is later this May. And so that will inform will inform Transport Canada how CN has identified and accounted for the risks and what remedial measures are in place. But even from a proactive perspective, under those key trains and key roads rules, there are reduced speed limits imposed on trains traveling through this area, as well as the requirements for increased track inspections in order to mitigate risks.
Okay, I'm going to move along to my next question. Ms. Hogan, earlier Mr. Keenan said that Transport Canada, quote, took significant action on all recommendations in the Auditor General's 2013 report. Is that consistent with what you found?
I don't know if I would use the same qualifier. I think significant is a word that everyone measures in a different way, but we definitely saw that they took action. There was an increase in the number of inspections. There was a more rigorous follow-up on corrective actions, as we talked about earlier. In our sample, 92% of the case files we looked at, there was a follow-up on corrective actions, and they had been taken. We saw an increase in risk-based planning about oversight activities. But what's missing now is making those linkages, right, of collecting data and using that data to inform future risk-based information. But more importantly, what we think is one of the really key fundamental, gaps is, well, there's actually two. One is measuring the effectiveness of the safety management systems of the rail companies, but then also the overall effectiveness of all of this increase in activity to make sure that it's directed in the right places and that it's having an impact on rail safety overall.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Keenan. Mr. Keenan, this question also relates to the timing of Transport Canada's interventions. February 2019, as we all know, CP had a grain train parked on a hill near Field, BC without the handbrakes applied. It took off and the incident killed 3 men. 2 years later, February 2021, just a few months ago, essentially the same incident happened. CP parked another grain train in the same location, and Transport Canada found that there was an immediate threat of another fatal accident. When they were asked, CP said, we didn't apply the handbrakes because the regulations don't require us to. And then after that second incident, Transport Canada stepped in with a special order and essentially said that you're not allowed to park trains unattended, I believe, in that geographical area. Now, why didn't Transport Canada step in after the first incident in February 2019 and put that protective order in place?
I'm sorry, we are well over time, almost a minute. I will have to move on.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry for
to our next round of questions, which is a 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Lawrence.
My question is almost the same as Mr. Bachrach, so I'll give a small preamble, but you can probably answer Mr. Keenan the question Mr. Bachrach answered in mine.
Given the importance of this question for Quebec, I had the intention of speaking French, but I have to apologize to the interpreter for so doing. Mr. Keenan, the procedure is absolutely important, but it's very important, particularly for Mr. Bachrach, because when should we not act immediately to prevent accidents of this nature again?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to answer in 3 parts. First of all, given the tragedy in Field, British Columbia, which is still under inquiry by the RCMP.
After the Field incident, where there was a train with a crew nearby and with the emergency brakes on, its sort role. So Transport Canada, within a very short period of time, I can't remember, Mike can say, but it's probably like hours and days, put in place the requirement to an additional requirement on the train securement rules, essentially requiring a very with a very clear standard for handbrakes on unattended trains at grade, even if they're on power. And I think the member is right. There was an incident recently where there was a train in a similar area that didn't have the handbrakes applied, and that it turns out that the principle of the rule that we put in place immediately after field was clear. If the train's unattended, you have to put on handbrakes according to this formula of the number of cars and grade, and that wasn't done. And it was the view. There was sort of I would say a difference of perspective as to whether or not the train was unattended, and the clarification of the rules was not to say unattended trains have to be secured. That was established across Canada in a very unambiguous way immediately after field. It was a clarification that in Transport Canada's view, these conditions make for an unattended train, and in those conditions, you have to put on the handbrakes according to the formula. Mike, did I get anything? Do you want to elaborate on that? Because this is a specific incident that we've taken quite seriously. I know you've been following closely.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. The deputy is correct that immediately after the initial incident, Transport Canada took action with the requirements for the application of handbrakes on mountain grades. But after the subsequent incident, there was an order issued immediately to ensure that unattended trains would be properly secured. To add further layers of protection on this, two additional ministerial orders were issued. One with respect to requiring railways to prevent the accidental release of air brakes, and second, in order to improve the performance standards for rollaway protection. And so these measures are intended to prevent these very serious incidents from recurring. I would also note that the inspection activities are happening with respect to the Lagan subdivision, and an investigation is underway.
Thank you for that. I guess I'm going to make a brief comment. I'll give the floor over to Mr. Berthold, but I'm just concerned, and the Auditor General talked about it in bigger scopes, like the world is going faster, and I don't know if we have enough time anymore for analysis paralysis. Like technology is changing quickly. We need to shift quickly and respond quickly. Like the regulatory response, I get it, is important, but we need to accelerate. That's my comment. Mr. Berthold, the floor is yours, my friend.
Mr. Berthold, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Colleagues to give me 30 seconds more if they agree, because I have a very important question that came from the comments from the Auditor General just minutes ago. Monsieur Keenan, la vérificatrice.
Mr. Keenan, the AG, it set the lesson for us. With respect to following up on the committee's own recommendations, the different parliamentary committees, who recommended over the years many things to Transport Canada. The AG has seen committee reports that have issued many recommendations, one of which was in 2018 on rail safety, and you are going to follow through for next year, you say. Would it be possible for you to review those reports, these previous reports by committees, and give us the status update on each and every recommendation that was made by a parliamentary committee since 2013, so we can see what follow-up was given to those recommendations emanating from parliamentary committees? I don't ask you to do that today, of course, but in 20 or 30 days. Absolutely, we can do so. It would be a pleasure for us to provide that information to the committee.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to Mr. Fergus for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to come back to a question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Blois, at the beginning of the meeting. But before I do so, I'd like to get back to what Mr. Berthold has just said. I want to say to Transport Canada, we in the Public Accounts Committee, when we receive a very positive report from the AG, that is to say that a department has followed up on recommendations that were made in the past, we certainly are generous in our praise. But when the AG brings in a report that indicates that the follow-up was not done, that there was no follow-up to past recommendations, we can be more difficult. And I think today is one of those days. Listen, the question that Mr. Blois asked but wasn't able to have answered dealt with Section 5.21 and 5.48 that deal with the need for Transport Canada to better understand how procedures lead to better results in the arena of safety. You know that safety factors involve many, many elements that have to be taken into account. But what can be done to improve the safety of our rail system? What are the safety standards that you would evaluate that improvement upon?
Several parts to the question from the honourable member. I would say I don't want to overly interpret the Auditor General, but I think she's sort of recognized the progress we have made and pointed out the significant gaps and things we have to do. On the question of the activities that lead to the better security outcomes, we have made a lot of progress and done a lot of work to use information and data from multiple sources, including oversight, to guide actions, including regulatory standards and inspections and audits to improve security outcomes. And we think we've made progress there. But the Auditor General about 10 minutes ago, I think clearly and articulately stated the challenge that before us and where we have more work to do based on her recommendations of mapping and figuring out in an analytical way the relationship between specific aspects of the SMS program to safety outcomes, but more importantly, everything we're doing. And I think, and it goes back to this point where I think we're being criticized and challenged. We're also being guided in key steps that we can take to create a higher performing safety system. So we are committed to actually deliver actions that follow up and deliver and respond in a timely manner to her recommendations. And we have shared with the committee detailed of the action plan, which we're trying to establish clear time bounds for specific activities. And we believe by the end of 2021, we will have made some significant progress. We will not be done because the challenge that the Auditor General has put before us will take us a while to completely meet, but we think we can make significant progress in beginning to assess effectiveness even by the end of this year coming.
Pour faire plus que...
To do more than what you've done this year, what do you think about this series of recommendations from the AG? Do you think that in 2022, 2023, you will be in a position to complete those recommendations, to follow through on the recommendations?
Bringing some transparency to this commitment of time, I think if I can, I'll turn it to Mr. de Jong to describe very briefly what we are committing to do this year versus next year in terms of to answer the member's question.
Peut-être parce
very
que
brief response.
Peut-être parce que j'ai pas beaucoup.
Because I don't have a lot of time left, Madam Chair. Can you give me a date? Just say by 2022, 2023, 2024, we'll have finished or implemented all the AG's recommendations.
I would say we will have significant steps taken later this year. For example, we're going to begin.
But what's the final date when you think that you would have most of these things done? It's just I'm just looking for a date, if I could.
Mike, I think 2023 is fair. Is that fair?
Yes. Thanks for the question. So it's 2023 for the full evaluation and October 21 for the performance indicators.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fergus. We will now go to the last round of questioning that we will have time for, and that will be a 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thanks very much, Chair. For Ms. Hogan, in your opening remarks, I noted that there was some urgency about acting, doing something to improve rail safety. Was there consultation to improve the safety situation in terms of the 2015 recommendations? Is it just going to start in 2022? So April 2022, that'll be more than a year after you brought this report down. Are you satisfied with this time frame? I recognize that it takes time to bring about change and bring in new activities that in all departments. I find that it is a reasonable time frame, but I would always like to see action happen more quickly. However, at the end of the line, we want to see the action taken. And I would perhaps shorter deadlines would be fine, but nonetheless, a deadline is a deadline. Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Can you explain to me why it would take more than a year to launch consultation on something that is as important as the safety of people?
I would say only that we recognize the need to move faster on this. We had some analytical homework that we had to do to identify the best path forward, and we're consulting with leading organizations. But I think we anticipate making significant progress, including consulting on this over the next year.
Well, Mr. Keenan, why? A lack of resources? Preventing you from consulting? If my house caught on fire, would you say we're going to put it out in a month from now after consultation? Or now we're waiting a year.
The consultation's already, but I'll turn it over to Mr. de Jong to elaborate on that.
Just a very brief answer, please.
Thank you for the question. Much of our work in terms of the regulatory development will be informed by the findings of our effectiveness audits on SMS, which will be launched in September 21. We'll be able to use those results to help drive our regulatory action in this space.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Bachrach for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to return to the event in Field in 2019. And if I understood Mr. Keenan's comments correctly, following that event, Transport Canada put in place a regulatory requirement that hand brakes be applied on trains left unattended on certain grades. 2 years later, another train was left without the handbrakes applied, and Transport Canada found that there was, quote, an immediate threat of another fatal accident. In your comments, you suggested that there was a misinterpretation of Transport Canada's regulations by the rail company. What was that misinterpretation, and who was at fault when it comes to the event in 2021?
It's a very good question, Madam Chair. I apologize. We're going to have to apply some discretion to our answer here. And the reason for doing that is that it's with respect to an incident that's currently under assessment and potentially investigation. If I can, I'm going to turn it to Mr. de Jong, who can share what information he can about this incident to elaborate the difference between 2019 and the 2021.
Thank you for the question. One of the ministerial orders that was issued after this incident involved requiring railways to work on a clear definition with respect to attended versus unattended trains. And it's anticipated that as railways work with government to deliver on this clear definition, that this will help ensure consistent implementation of the rules with respect to uncontrolled or preventing incidents involving uncontrolled movements.
Okay, it's frustrating because it seems like lives are at stake. People are getting on board these trains under conditions that are clearly unsafe, and it's difficult to get answers to these simple questions, which is how did, after an event that killed 3 men, how did another event that was at high risk of a fatal accident, how was that allowed to occur 2 years later? And it sounded from your previous comments like you were indicating that the order that was put in place around applying handbrakes was not clear enough, and the rail company misunderstood it or misinterpreted it, and so didn't apply the handbrakes and almost caused another fatal accident. So does the responsibility lie with Transport Canada to put clear regulations in place that the rail companies understand, or does the responsibility lie with the rail company to follow the law?
A very brief answer.
2 things on this. The field incident was a terrible tragedy, and it pointed out and it revealed a risk. And we took immediate action and put a very clear and very strong rule in place. The second incident resulted in us providing additional rules that I think make it absolutely clear the scope of the application of the train securement on grade rules. I think the idea of trying to say it is that, and I think the second one is an example of where there is an identified risk and there's proactive action. Whether it's enforcement, whether it's rules, to ensure that that risk does not turn into an accident. And the third point is I would actually contest the characterization that it's unsafe, because the actual facts and the statistics and the evidence points to the fact that the rail system is getting safer over time. It's getting more safe over time. The number of accidents, the number of deaths is going down, while the volume, the number of trains on the tracks is going up. And as a result, there's a reduction in the rate of accidents, and there's a reduction in the risk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keenan. We will have to end there. We are well over time. Colleagues, I want to thank you for your very tough but fair questions that you've asked here today. And thank you, witnesses, for joining us. We certainly do appreciate hearing your testimony. Just a reminder, colleagues, that Tuesday's meeting will be on report number 9, Investing in Canada Plan. So, is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting? Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
you.